2 rooks, 400 elo. Everyone knows this one. 2 rooks taking turns, cutting the king down the board rank by rank until it runs out of squares. 1 rook delivers check, the king steps back, the other rook takes away another rank, and the process repeats until the king hits the back row and has nowhere left to go. It is the first checkmate every player learns and the most mechanical. As long as the rooks stay safe and work together, the result is never in doubt. If you do not know this one yet, learn it today. Queen and king, 700 elo. A queen alone can dominate the board, but she cannot finish the job without support. The technique starts with the queen shadowing the enemy king, cutting off squares and pushing it toward the edge. Once the king reaches the side of the board, your own king has to march over and take away the last escape squares. The key danger is stalemate. If the queen gets too aggressive and the enemy king has no legal moves, a completely won position becomes a draw on the spot. The way to avoid it is to always leave the king at least 1 square to move to until your king arrives to help deliver the final blow. Done right, it is smooth and inevitable. Rook and king, 1000 elo. Now it gets interesting. A single rook cannot chase a king around the board on its own. It needs the friendly king to do the heavy lifting. The process starts with your king marching toward the center, cutting off ranks and files alongside the rook, slowly squeezing the enemy king toward the edge. The critical concept here is opposition, placing your king directly facing the enemy king with 1 square between them, forcing it to give ground. Every time the defending king tries to step forward, your king blocks the path, and the rook sweeps in to take away another rank. Without opposition, the enemy king just shuffles back and forth forever. With it, the checkmate becomes clean and logical, and the king has nowhere left to run. Pawn and king. 1200 elo. A pawn in the center of the board with your king nearby looks like an easy win. It is not. This is one of the most instructive and deceptive endgames in chess, and it all comes down to one concept: opposition. The instinct for most beginners is to push the pawn immediately and let the king follow. That is usually a mistake. The correct approach is to advance the king first, establish opposition directly in front of the pawn, and use that opposition to physically push the defending king out of the way. If the defending king can maintain opposition and reach the promotion square before your pawn, the game is a draw. The difference between a win and a draw can come down to a single move, a single square. This endgame teaches you that in chess, precision is everything. 2 bishops, 1500 elo. 2 bishops working together can force checkmate, and the technique, while not easy, is more manageable than what comes later on this list. The key advantage is that together the bishops cover every square on the board. One controls the light squares, the other controls the dark. The process involves using both bishops to cut off diagonals and steadily shrink the box of squares available to the enemy king, pushing it toward the corner. Unlike the knight and bishop, where the king must be driven to a very specific corner, the 2 bishops have no such restriction. Any corner on the board will do. Once the king is trapped there, the friendly king steps in to take away the last escape squares, and the bishops close in for the final checkmate. It requires patience and coordination, but compared to what comes next, it is almost straightforward. Knight and bishop. 1900 elo. Here is where most players give up. A knight and bishop can force checkmate in theory, but the technique is brutally difficult. So difficult that grandmasters have failed to convert it under time pressure, and there are famous cases of strong players letting it slip to a draw. The problem is that the knight and bishop together can only cover 1 color of corner, meaning the enemy king must be driven to a very specific corner on the board. If it escapes to the wrong corner, the whole process has to start again. The knight requires constant repositioning using a technique called the W maneuver to stay effective, and the margin for error throughout is razor thin. You will probably never face this endgame in a real game, but if you ever do and you know how to win it, you are operating at a level almost nobody else can match. Queen versus rook, 2200 elo. A queen beats a rook, obviously, except this endgame is far harder than it looks and has humbled many strong players who thought the same thing. The process is slow and methodical. The queen has to give precise checks, pushing the enemy king and rook back row by row, steadily cornering them until they run out of space. As the king gets pushed toward the back rank, the position becomes clearer. King opposition combined with the queen swinging to the right, square starts to create mating threats that the defender cannot avoid. At that point, the rook is usually forced to sacrifice itself just to delay the inevitable, buying a few extra moves before the queen finishes the job. The technique requires patience and accuracy throughout. Rush it or play imprecisely, and the defending side can make the process far longer and more painful than it should be. 2 knights versus pawn. 3000 elo. 2 knights alone cannot force checkmate. With perfect play, the defending king can always avoid being mated. The attacking side simply runs out of ways to deliver the final blow without producing stalemate. But add a single pawn on the defending side and the endgame becomes theoretically winnable and extraordinarily difficult. The pawn is the key, not because it helps the attacking side directly, but because it gives the defending side an extra tempo move, eliminating the stalemate problem that makes 2 knights impossible without it. The technique involves blockading the pawn, cornering the enemy king, and building a mating net so tight there is no escape. When the net is ready, the pawn is unblocked, giving the defender that crucial tempo move, and the knight that was doing the blocking swings over to deliver checkmate before the pawn can promote. The window for executing this correctly is so narrow that even at the Grandmaster level, it is considered one of the hardest positions in all of chess to convert. Theoretically solved, practically unsolvable for almost everyone.